Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I am your co-host, Brian Bosarge. Along with me, as always, my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, we are 210 days, 22 hours, 59 minutes, and 39 seconds away from the 2022 NFL Draft.
Yeah, hey, it's been another fun week. Been another week of a lot of content for us, and watching. I think I don't know about you. I felt like week 4 now. I feel like I'm starting to get a good feel for some of these players, watching them through 4 weeks and seeing what's an outlier, what's consistent, and how to kind of change.
Absolutely. I mean, some guys you can tell by now either they've got it or they don't. I mean, it's as simple as that. I wrote as much about some of those guys this week. In my 7 and 5 column, you talked about some of those guys as well in your stock up, stock down column on Tuesday. Check that out at draftcountdown.com. But Shane, we got to talk about some injury and some other notes came up this week. A couple of wide receivers going to miss the rest of the year. Some fringe draftable guys possibly, but we'll talk about them quickly anyway. DJ Matthews, the receiver from Indiana. I was watching that game when he went down this past Saturday. And Elijah Cooks, one of the many weapons for Carson Strong in Nevada, also going to be out for the season.
It sucks. I think both would have made a camp of some sort if, depending what happens. And I still don't know exactly where the eligibility is at for some of these players. But, DJ Matthews had a really good game against Cincinnati and helped Indiana beat that one in the first half. So sucks to see for sure.
You mentioned eligibility, and that also came up this week where the NFL and the NFLPA released a statement saying that if you have used 4 years of eligibility of the draft, if you're 4 years removed from high school, you're eligible for the draft. And if you don't want to be in the draft, you have to formally give them notice that you're not going to be in it.
Which is interesting, and I think with the NIL too, that now that college players can kind of have some type of advisors, I think there's going to be a lot. I think it's a lot easier to do those kind of things logistically and talk out that when you couldn't have an agent before. So. Yeah, I really wonder. I think we have a couple questions about it tonight that we'll kind of address the depth of the draft because it's going to be big either way. And I would imagine most of these 5-6 year seniors are, even if would have another year, are going to go. I think the schools are going to want the scholarships, going to want the openings, to be honest.
So we're still going to end up like you talked about in the last few weeks. We're going to end up with the largest pool of draft prospects probably ever, I would imagine, coming up for the 2022 draft. So those 256 draft spots are going to fill up quickly, and there's going to be a lot of guys trying to get on those 90-man rosters. So the XFL and whatever is happening with the USFL need to get it figured out here pretty quick for some of those guys. But we also had a trade this week, Shane, involving a former first-round pick. Not 2 years ago, C.J. Henderson, cornerback from Jacksonville, gets moved to Carolina in exchange for Dan Arnold. Jacksonville gets a 3rd-round pick from Carolina, and Carolina will get a 5th-round pick coming back. So basically a net 4th-round pick and C.J. Henderson for Dan Arnold. What happened with C.J. Henderson there? Was it the new coaching staff, new regime that just didn't work out?
Really tried to work with, and he was doing them beforehand. He's dealt with some injuries. Like Mike was kind of right. He was definitely a prospect who was a bit of a project with that elite athletic ability that made some good plays in college, and you felt like he could develop into a number 1 corner, and he still has that ability. I don't think that athleticism has gone anywhere ultimately. So I just feel like maybe it was a bad fit. He wasn't where he needed to be. And, the Jaguars have been kind of sold off Joe Schubert. They sold off a number of their players for some of these later round picks. It seems to be what they're kind of moving towards. So if I'm Carolina, I think it could be worth a shot, though. they're a team that's a little lacking in the pick department because of the Sam Darnold trade already. But they didn't lose any net number of picks. I think, especially in this draft, moving from the 3rd back to the 5th isn't a terrible option ultimately.
Another good thing for Carolina, or the way they may see it, is if last year's draft is any indication, they're going to recoup a lot of these picks back, because they moved down like 7 or 8 times in the 2021 draft. So they're not afraid to make the move. Let's have a little fun here, Shane. I asked a question on Twitter Saturday night in response to an Eric Edholm tweet where he was just basically bashing Bo Nix. So I decided to say, you can only draft one quarterback, Shane, to save your franchise. Bo Nix, Jake Bentley, or Tanner Morgan. Who you got? Or you just quit?
I think I'm taking Bo Nix there all day, right? Like I think Jake Bentley's out. I know how much love you have for Jake Bentley, but not much. But the fact that he hasn't really been able to perform as well at South Alabama with good weapons is not very telling. Like that's not great. Tanner Morgan, I think is fine, but as we saw in this game against Green, like they have to run because he just can't pass the football. I really do think Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman kind of made him look much better than he did. I mean, 2 years ago, I was like, maybe he could be something. He couldn't. Bo Nix is a weird. I don't know. He's a weird quarterback. Watching him against Penn State, 2 weeks ago, throw up like medicine ball type footballs. But he has some athletic ability. I think you can move him around. You can have him run a little bit. I do think he has some physical tools that the other two don't have. So I'll take that upside ultimately. But it's not a fun conversation.
No. You're not going to win many games as an NFL franchise with any of those guys under center. You asked a very interesting question that got us a lot of feedback here 2 days ago. You put 5 edge rushers that have been drafted in the top 5. 4 edge rushers have been drafted in the top 5 in recent years, and 1 that we expect to be drafted in the top 5 next year. And asked our readers to rank them. Kayvon Thibodeau, Chase Young, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, and Joey Bosa. The most common ranking of number 1 was Myles Garrett, and I think we all can agree that that's probably the right call there. But where you go 2 through 5 here?
And my thought was really them as prospects, which is always tough to get that feedback because you're kind of painted by their NFL careers, right? And it's bound to happen. It's bound to happen with us as well. It's like so hard because I think all these guys are just so good. Yeah, I think Garrett has to be 1. I would probably put Chase Young 2. Man, that's tough, but I think physically, I think he's on a separate level than the other guys. And then, the Bosas are so hard. I think I'd probably go Nick, Thibodeau, Joey. I think that's probably how I'd rank them. And honestly, I could be convinced that Thibodeau's 3. I think the recency bias is kind of a problem because a lot of people don't watch Oregon, don't watch Pac-12 football. I think it's, we have 3 Ohio State guys in there. I think it's much easier to watch those players. And Myles Garrett has had such a successful NFL career that people are buying in. So I think Thibodeau was heavily underrated in how people rank them in our responses. So I could be convinced to put him at 3, but I think I'd probably put him at 4.
I mean, currently right now, if I'm not mistaken, I know he's number 1 on my big board. He's still number 1 on yours too, correct? Yeah. Yep, so, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at Kayvon Thibodeau, probably the top. And I don't see any reason, barring injury at this point or major injury at this point, that he's not going to end up as the top prospect on my board. And I haven't had, a non-quarterback up there since well, maybe last year, but because I think I actually had Penei Sewell ahead of Trevor Lawrence ever slightly. But anyway, Kayvon Thibodeau, I think, is a great prospect, and I don't disagree with anything you said there. I'm Garrett 1, Chase Young 2, and then you can split hairs on 3 through 5 there, and you're not really going to get a wrong answer, I don't believe. Shane, week 4, we watched some good prospects here, and I've been waiting to talk about this. I wrote a column about it. Basically, I wrote about 250 words on this guy on Saturday in my small school scouting, and I've been waiting all week to talk about E.J. Perry, the quarterback from Brown. I asked you, I believe, on this podcast last week, how did he even get on our watch list? An Ivy League quarterback I had never heard of. And lo and behold, he's one of the best passers I've seen, all things considered, in a vacuum, one of the best passers I've seen this year so far, considering that he has zero, and I mean zero talent around him, the Brown quarterback.
So I watched him a little bit. I kind of picked some things from 2019 it was some highlights, I think, on YouTube to kind of rank him initially. And then, you wrote that article and I was like, I got to check him out. And so I ended up going back yesterday and watching the game that you watched. And I was definitely impressed. He's definitely shot way up my board. I had him kind of at the bottom. But yeah, he was a Boston College transfer. So it's not like this is, a guy that is, was a 1-star recruit or anything. He wasn't a major recruit. He didn't start at Boston College, but it was kind of interesting. But I don't know. I was definitely impressed with with his arm talent. And like you said, I think anyone that watches him and watches Brown, like, they're not a good team. They're not a good team. And he's making things happen. Like, he's scoring points. He's making things happen. He's moving around. So I feel like if we had a 2020 season, he probably would have been talked about more going to this year. But I think he's got to be, I think this year is tough to say he's draftable, but I think he's got to be on the radar to make a camp and maybe make a team.
I think what gets him drafted is an all-star game. If he gets, and be it the Senior Bowl, be it the Shrine, be it the NFLPA, he's going to get – I need to see him around players that aren't going to be accountants or lawyers or professors next year because, I mean, that's basically what he played against Friday night. And I need to see him surrounded with better talent. I need to see how he reacts, but I want to watch him again. Hopefully I can find another game this year, to see him play at least one more time. Who was one of the guys that you had that just stuck out to you this week?
I'll say probably the top player for me in terms of jumping off the game film this week was Oklahoma defensive lineman Perrion Winfrey. And he's a guy that they kind of move around the line a little bit, but he was up against West Virginia, which Oklahoma didn't exactly play great football in this game. But one area where they did excel was along the line. And the nice thing was he was going up against Doug Nestor, the guard from West Virginia, who we talked about last week, and so it was a really exciting matchup, and Winfrey clearly won that matchup. There was probably a handful of times where he knew when the ball was going to be snapped. Like, I don't know if there were certain tells that West Virginia was doing, or if, Winfrey, he's just that quick off the snap. But his first step is really, really good. And that kind of explosive, Nestor couldn't really get a good handle on, popping out of his stance and being able to stand up to him. So Winfrey was getting in the backfield. He had a sack in the game. He was getting, pressures at times. I thought he looked like a player that, could be a good interior lineman and is players who you can move around the line a little bit. He's under 300 pounds, so I think he can play 5 tech. I think he can play 3 tech. I think he can fit a number of different schemes. So he's someone that I'm really evaluating and not my board.
I do. I like Perry and Winfrey. I like Isaiah Thomas, their other defensive linemen. And you talked about his matchup with Doug Nestor, and also in your stock, Doug Nestor got the old down vote this week. So I'm guessing he got worked.
He got worked. I had to.
While we're talking about offensive linemen, that brings me to my other guy this week, and it's a guy you had talked up to me, but it's my first look at Charles Cross, the redshirt sophomore offensive tackle for Mississippi State. And if a brick wall had athletic ability, can move, that's what Charles Cross would be. This guy it's over. I mean, you're not getting around this cat. And LSU, anybody who went against Charles Cross face-to-face, man-to-man, kicked out the club. It just was a no-go on the left side. I think he's gonna test well whenever that time comes, and he's gonna end up in the mid to. If you said Charles Cross may go in the top 10 at some point because of the lack of offensive tackle prospects in this class, it wouldn't shock me at all. I was very impressed with his performance against LSU.
That's good. I've been on board, and I'm like, no one's really talking about him. So I was wondering, like, am I way off here? Is something wrong? And I think his offensive tackle class just has a lot of those players that are very good, but not, we have Evan Neal who just leaps, he's great. And I think the next set of players, the next, I'd even say 5 are guys that could go in the first round and develop more. Some of them go back to school. I think Cross, he's my number 2. And I think he's a redshirt. I mean, once again, eligibility. I think he's a redshirt sophomore. So I'm interested to see, how, if he comes out and what happens with that. But Mississippi State needs to have that kind of prospect. They don't have a lot going for them this year. But I'm glad you were impressed, because I love his pass blocking, and the dude's, he's big and can move. That just screams NFL to me.
Well, the thing is, he's going to get a lot of pass blocking sets, because they really don't run the football a whole lot. Who else you got for us this week, Shane?
I'm going special teams, but don't worry, it's not a kicker. I'm not gonna put Gabe Burkick on there. But Deshaun Jameson, the corner for Texas, he had a punt return that should have been a touchdown. It was super close, and probably the best return guy that I've seen this season. And he really hasn't. The last time I watched Texas, I don't think he had a punt return. Nothing was shallow enough for him to return it. But I mean, just his movement in that short space to evade tacklers, and he has that third gear, was really impressive. And he plays, I don't think he's a starter for Texas, but he plays a good amount of snaps, can be a decent, number 4 kind of cornerback, maybe even a nickel guy, be a punt returner, kick returner, special teams player, gunner. I think there's a lot that he can do for an NFL team. So I think it's worth shouting out. Might be a player that doesn't get drafted, depending, maybe late, but is one of those guys that could stick around because of that special teams ability, and has an electric kind of gear that he can bring to the. I think there's NFL teams that need better return guys right now. So.
Look at us both writing up return guys this week. I was talking about on Saturday, talking about Jalen Virgil from App State as well.
Yeah, I like him. Yeah.
So look at that. Shane, we're going to talk, speaking of wide receivers, these guys are going to play wide receiver in the NFL. We're about to talk about. They're probably not going to be special teams guys for the most part, but we're going to cut you down to 5. I know that's hurting you a little bit on the inside. We're only going to talk about our top 5. And since we both have our top 4s are the same in some order, we'll start with the 5th for both of us, because that's really the only debatable prospect here for us. We'll start with your number 5, Purdue wide receiver David Bale. Why do you like David Bale so much?
I just love his ability to be an alpha receiver. I love this draft of receivers. I wouldn't say it's the best ever, maybe not top to bottom as good as the last 2 years, but it has outside number 1 types. And I think David Bell is that. Wandel Moore having some success in the NFL now at 5'7", whatever, running a 4.3. David Bell is, he's 6'2", he's 210, he can take hits. He's really good after the catch, and he can punish defenders. Like, he can fight. He doesn't have to get that separation to win like Moore did. So I think they're very different players on a team that doesn't produce a lot of NFL prospects. But I think David Bell opened things up for Wandel Moore in a lot of senses. And he had the 3 touchdown game earlier this season against weak competition, had a concussion last week. So hopefully he'll be back and be, everything should be fine. But I just really think he has the early production. He produced out of the gate in the Big Ten as an 18-year-old freshman. Usually, to me, especially a receiver, that indicates someone that can play. If you can come in fresh out of high school and produce in a Power 5 conference, that's usually a good indication of play. And he's gotten better as the years went on, which I think is important. So I feel like if he was at a bigger school, he might be higher on this list. And I think limits his upside of what he can do in college a little bit. But I don't know. I really like him. He feels like that guy that's not going round 1, but going like round 2, and then still a really good career.
I really wanted to watch him last week, but you mentioned the concussion. He was out with the concussion last week, so I didn't get a chance to see him when they played Illinois. My number 5, I will get to see in person this week, as I'll be live covering the game between the Louisiana Raging Cajuns and South Alabama Jaguars for draft countdown. And it's South Alabama wide receiver Jalen Talbert. Big guy, 50-50 ball. He's going to get it. Speed, open field. I think he can play every receiver spot that you line him up at. He can go in the slot. You can line him up outside. He's a playmaker, Shane.
I think he's good. I mean, I think the production you can't really deny. He's definitely produced and been dominant at that level. I mean, I worry a little bit about how he's going to test his athletic ability and that high end speed. But I think it'll be good enough for him to be. I think he's going to go in the top 100 for sure. I just wonder where that's capped at. His size is intriguing too. He's bigger than I feel like when I watch him, if I would have guessed his height and his weight, usually the smaller schools have smaller guys. I feel like he's probably 6'1", but if he comes in at 6'2" and a half, 6'3", I think that's going to really seal it, because like you said, he just produces when they're contested catches. Like, he's absolutely incredible at that. So I wish, I want to see him more, like better competition. That would be the ultimate. But we really didn't get that too much, last year or so far this year. So I'm hoping at some point.
Well, if you can pencil one player in for the Senior Bowl in Mobile this year, you can pencil in Jalen Talbert from South Alabama. Because not only is he play his collegiate ball in Mobile, he played his high school ball in Mobile at McGill-Tulane. So, but
he's going to be on every poster, every sign,
poster,
everything.
Yes, no doubt about it. My number 4 receiver is your number 2 receiver, and it's Ohio State wide receiver Garrett Wilson. And I almost feel like it's a toss-up between him and his teammate, which we'll get to in a minute. But Garrett Wilson, he's there, man. I mean, he's a great speed guy, I think, and he's gonna be a good player at the NFL level.
I think he's the most receiver in this draft, and it's not that he's the biggest or he has the size speed combo, but just the way that he contorts his body to make catches. Like, almost anything in his vicinity is a catchable football, and I think it's an important aspect of his game. He scored a touchdown in the first 3 games this season. He's been really consistent. He's not, we'll talk about Chris Olave. Like, they're such different players, but have such unique strengths. Like you said, Wilson has that athleticism. He has the ability to kind of win on that athletic ability. And I think his football IQ is exceptional against zone coverage. The way he can find holes in the zone, especially in the red zone. And he's not, a huge guy. I think that's important. So, the size factor, but I think he's going to be a legitimate, 4-4 speed player. And to number 2.
Your number 4 receiver is Chris Olave, so we'll come back to him in a minute because he's a bit higher on mine. Your number 3 receiver is my newly minted number 2 receiver, and I think he's going to end up being I think he's going to end up being at the top by the time the season's over with you, Shane, because you seem to be sharing a lot of love for Southern Cal wide receiver Drake London here lately. And why not? I mean, God, the production, man. And you talk about a guy who could line it up everywhere, slot, outside, inside, backfield. It doesn't matter. He's such a great route runner. He doesn't drop anything really, and underrated speed maybe. But Drake London, hell of a player. My number 2 receiver, your number 3.
I've definitely been impressed this year. I mean, last year they played him in the slot, which he can do. He's done, but I think it was just gross incompetence to put a player of his like Drake London in a big slot. No, put Drake London on the outside. Let him go up and catch passes. And I think this season has been shades of Mike Evans at Texas A&M. I mean, that's what he looks like. I think he's a low 4.5 speed player. And just the way he has those like long arms that can touch the ground when he's standing up. And boom, he can catch almost anything. Love the range. And I think he's gotten better in terms of knowing how to work opposing corners, how to sell routes, head fakes, some of the small stuff. I think he's doing really, really well. So it's gonna be tough. I think he can get to number 2. He could get to number 1 on my board for sure. But I think this top 4 is all like very, very close to me.
Well, the guy who's currently number 1 on your board is number 3 on mine, and he may not have been very known outside of draft circles maybe before this past Saturday, but he's known now. Treylon Burks, the wide receiver from Arkansas, what a day he had against Texas A&M.
And Texas A&M is a top-tier defense. They have corners that are going to get drafted, and he just lit them up, especially in that first half. He's just another huge player, 6'3", 225, and is going to run in the 4.5s. Like, I just don't know how you stop that. That's why he's number 1 on my board. I mean, he's probably 10, 15 pounds on Drake London, and he's still 6'3", probably coming a little under that. He's just to me, an elite athletic talent at his size speed combination is going to be unbelievable. His relative athletic score is going to be really, really good. And he produces with Arkansas, as we've talked about on the show before, like KJ Jefferson, their quarterback, isn't great. He's a runner. But so Treylon Burks has bailed him out many a times last season. I mean, against Missouri, it was just like it was chucking up balls and Treylon Burks coming down and making it, landing on his feet, and making a guy miss and blowing it up. And that's what he's doing against Texas A&M, getting down the field. So I think Burks is. I think people are going to continue to undersell him until he gets drafted.
I'm going to go on record right now and say he runs high 4.3, 4.39 at the
wow.
Combine. I'm going on record.
If he runs a 4.39, he's going to be a top 10 pick easily, and maybe a top 5 pick.
I think that's going to happen. I think he's going to have a couple of months to train and get ready, and I'm not going to put I'm not going to put that on him, but as close to Megatron as you can get without saying that. I Treylon Burks.
I mean, do you think he's going to come in at 225 then if he runs that, or is he going to come in?
He won't come in at 235 or whatever.
If he runs a 4.5 flat at 235.
Yeah.
I mean that's unbelievable.
I think you'll see him. You'll see him drop to. You'll see him cut to about 222, 225, and he runs 4.39 at the combine. On the record, right here, 9.29.
Write that down. I need to.
Woo. All right, let's. Number 2 on my board that we talked about was Drake London. Number 2 on your board, Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. Number 1 on your board, we just talked about Treylon Burks. number one on my board is Chris Olave, the wide receiver from Ohio State. And this is based off last year to me as much as this year from what I've seen. But I love his speed. I love his hands and his just ability to get down the field, stretch the field. And an image will stick with me forever. And it's why I like Justin Fields as much as I did last year, was the throw that Fields makes to Olave against Clemson in the playoffs is a throw and catch that I'll never forget.
He's definitely talented. Just such a smooth athlete. When you watch him get off the line and make cuts, it's almost seamless. And I think that's so hard to defend. And I think it's why college defenders have had so many problems with that. He just moves so flawlessly that it's just like, you know, he looks like he's just like cutting up butter. Like it's just running through, just boom, boom, very, very quick, soft, smooth. Like it's just melting right there. He can just melt into any route and do what he wants. So yeah, I think he's really good. I think he's going to be a first round pick. I think there is a chance he's the first receiver off the board. I'm not sure if he provides the upside that Burks or London or maybe even Wilson have, but the NFL is going to like Olave a lot more than I think the general public will. It's always a fear. I think when a guy goes back to school, you know, when he's not supposed to, when he's expected to come out, that usually isn't a great sign. But, you know, I think he's going to be a high pick, and he's not quite Devonta Smithing it this year. You know, without a quarterback, he got blanked against Tulsa, excuse me. I mix those two up all the time, but I think Olave's pretty good, and he'll be going to the first round somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably higher on him right now than I'll end up being when it all shakes out. But as of right now, I like the overall game for Olave. Late first round pick, I think is probably his floor. Well, now let's move on to week 5, Shane. And I could have picked any number of games as your main focus game this week. But with all the Matt Corral love we've had here on the podcast and on draftcountdown.com, we're going to talk about Mississippi and Alabama. Is this the year an assistant finally gets Nick Saban? Is this the year the streak ends? Lane Kiffin, do the Rebels beat the Tide this week?
I can't go that far when they're in Tuscaloosa. Like if this was, you know, I'd be interested if it was twisted and Matt Corral's playing home. I think they're going to score points. But, I mean, beating Alabama is going to be really, really hard to do. I don't know if the Mississippi defense has what it takes to actually win this game. But I am excited to see some of these Alabama players, especially on defense, go up against a quarterback with the quick release that he has. You know, the linebackers to me haven't played as well as I expected in Henry Toto and Christian Harris. So I want to see them maybe hopefully step up here. Josh Jobe's a player who I haven't really felt like has been great so far. He hasn't been bad, but I thought he might rise up to be a top corner in this draft. I don't think he's quite gotten there. So I think the Alabama defense struggled last year. And so maybe Jordan Battle makes a play. And then, you know, what happens on offense, I think like Alabama's been dominant, and I've kind of still been disappointed with a lot of their prospects. Like John Mechie hasn't taken the bull by the horns and become a dominant receiver. You know, can that happen here? I think Brian Robinson, the running backs, played really well, and Joel Billingsley, tight end, has gotten out of the doghouse finally. And we'll see Mississippi. We'll see what happens not only with Corral, but I think the offensive line is really good. Nick Broker, the offensive tackle, I like a lot. Jeremy James, the guard, and you know, I'm a big Darion Ely fan. He's not going to get drafted very high, the running back. Could have been a professional baseball player. But I hope he gets a little bit of play. And watch out for these receivers. The Mississippi Dontario Drummond's having a really good year. I like Jonathan Mingo a lot. So this is going to be a fun game that I'm going to have to watch twice just to watch all these guys.
No doubt about it. I think some of the guys that have for Alabama that haven't disappointed, maybe even over, is some of their interior defensive linemen, like Fadarian Mathis. I think he's played really well up to this point of the season. So we'll see how he goes. In Utah transfer center Orlando Umana. Might be some good matchups there inside. And you mentioned their guard Jeremy James. So look for those. Another my big game this week. We're going to talk about Cincinnati at Notre Dame, and Cincinnati is favored in this game. How crazy is that? Or at least they were at the time that I wrote that down in my notes. They were a two-point favorite on the road at Notre Dame. It's crazy. But here we are, Cincinnati, group of 5. This is it. I mean, if a group of 5 team is going to make the playoffs in this current format, Cincinnati has to win this game, and it has to be this year, or else it's just never going to happen until they expand the playoffs. But this is going to be my first real hardcore look at Desmond Ridder. I know you talked about him a couple weeks ago. I really liked the tight ends last year, but they seem to be underperforming a little bit this year. Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor, a couple guys that I liked coming in. But a guy I'm really anxious to see, and Senior Bowl Jim Nagy tweeted about him a couple weeks ago. You were really impressed with Darian Beavers, their linebacker. So he's definitely a guy that I want to get a look at. And Notre Dame, it's Kyle Hamilton, man. He's so fun to watch. One of the 3 best players in this draft class, without a doubt. So it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a fun game to watch. That game will be 1:30 on NBC. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, those Notre Dame guys up front, and I'm telling you, Isaiah Foskey and Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa are good, and I'm really intrigued to see. I want to hear next week how those Cincinnati corners do against Kevin Austin and crew for Notre Dame. It's going to be a good matchup.
I can't really argue with Stephen B. here.
I'm down.
Yeah. We've got 13 other games this week that we're going to watch, Shane. We got ambitious this week, I believe, with the schedule. Starting with my small school game this week, because I really didn't have a whole lot of options if I wanted to get something up Saturday morning. Friday night, 6:30 p.m. on ESPN, Houston at Tulsa. For me in this one, it's Houston's got the main players to watch, and last year, I fell in love with Peyton Turner. Had him as my 9th overall player. Ended up being a surprise first-round pick going to the Saints. Has played well so far in his rookie season. Can Logan Hall end up being a type of prospect on the level of Peyton Turner? He's a guy that'll be one of my main focuses on that for Houston.
Yeah, I'm just to see what you have to say about him and Tulsa offensive tackle Tyler Smith. If he's playing, then he should be draftable as well.
Another game I'll be watching Friday night, Iowa at Maryland, 7 p.m. on FS1. I've seen Maryland already, so have you. We both love Dante Demas. Our love for him is well known at this point. But I haven't watched Iowa yet, and after seeing a clip from their game, I believe it was their game last week, Cole Kublik, ESPN tweeted out a clip saying Tyler Linderbaum is the best center prospect in this draft. And it showed him basically handle his man at the line of scrimmage and then pull all the way around and hit 2 defenders in the secondary. Just amazing athleticism. And it seems like that happens every year with an Iowa offensive lineman. We just start raving about their athletic ability. But Tyler Linderbaum, I really want to watch him this week.
Yeah, he's a monster. I'll see how the run game goes. Tyler Goodson, I think, is a player that could hire the running back for Iowa higher than people think.
We've both watched BYU a time or two already this season, but we're going to see them again. You're going to see them Friday night, 8 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. BYU is at Utah State. So let's talk about a couple of the Utah State guys, or at least one. Justin Rice, double transfer from Fresno State to Arkansas State to Utah State as a linebacker, probably a late round grade, I would imagine, on him. And maybe some of the guys from BYU.
Rice is productive. I think he is an intriguing kind of special teams backup type. Might sneak into the draft there, so I'm excited to watch him. We've talked at length about the BYU running backs. Tyler Allgeier is one of my favorites, so I'm excited to see him. And their tight end Isaac probably won't be in this draft, but he was come back on after a slow start. He's a big red zone threat. So definitely a name I think to keep on the back burner down the line.
11 a.m. Saturday morning on ESPN. We could have gone with this as your big game to talk about this week. Arkansas at Georgia, undefeated Hogs, undefeated Dogs.
It's going to be fun. We talked about Traylon Burks already. I'm excited to see him against this Georgia secondary and Darren Kendrick and everything they bring to the table. But Arkansas has a potential first-round offensive tackle in Myron Cunningham. They have potential first-round safety in Juan. There's a lot of talent on this Arkansas squad that I think it is going to have to show it here against Georgia, because Georgia has. We've talked, I think, on the show before about their defensive lineman. Jordan Davis could be the top guy off the board. Devontae Wyatt is very good as well. And then we met Adam Anderson, the edge rusher. And Jamari Sawyer, the guard who's playing left tackle for them, I thought has done the best so far this season against Kingsley Enagbare from South Carolina. So he's going to get his shot to show up. I feel like I could just buy one of these Georgia prospects for like a day, right? The running backs and Zeus White, and they got more guys in the secondary. So I'm excited. I think it's Georgia's best matchup since Clemson, and Arkansas should put up a fight here.
This could be a game where Myron Cunningham can cement himself as a first-round pick if he handles, those Georgia edge guys as well as I think he can. Get another game for me, ESPN2 at 11 o'clock, Duke at North Carolina. My first look this season at Sam Howell, and it's been a roller coaster, man, for this cat. Man, Virginia Tech game bad, Virginia game good. What Sam Howell am I going to get to see this week?
Hopefully a good one. I feel like he's getting it back here. So he's he's getting back into the rhythm. Hopefully against Duke he shows up, right? Duke home, you better show up. And I like Duke's running back Teo Durant is been playing really well, so I think he's a fun one to watch.
Another guy I like for Duke is their center Jack Wallabaugh. Get a good look at him this week. Another game for me at 11 a.m. This one on the SEC Network. Tennessee at Missouri. I believe you saw Tennessee a couple weeks ago against Pitt, if I remember that correctly.
Yep.
My first look at both teams this week. Missouri, they've got a couple of guys, especially on defense, that I want to see. Kobe Whiteside, their interior defensive lineman, Trajan Jeffcoat, their edge rusher. But mostly I kind of want to see, because I've heard a lot of buzz about their quarterback, redshirt sophomore Connor Basilak, a guy I haven't watched yet. I believe it was a 3-star or 3 or 4-star recruit coming out of the state of Ohio, signed with Missouri. So he's a guy that I really want to get a good look at this week. Tennessee ain't got a whole lot.
Yeah, I feel like everyone in Tennessee just fell down the board after that exodus there. So I like Basilak. I'm interested to see what you think about him, because he has a big arm. He's a big dude, and he can move. So probably not in this draft. He's eligible, but he'll probably come out in a year or two.
When I saw the games you picked to watch this week, Shane, this next one stuck out like a sore thumb. Sacred Heart at Howard.
Yeah.
12 noon on ESPN Plus.
There's one prospect in this game, and it's Hart's running back, Julius Chestnut. I want to get a look at him. So he was a player added to my board in the offseason, and I watched some cut-ups on YouTube, and I was like, oh, this guy's big. He's dominant, great contact balance. His vision's good. So I don't know. Usually there's a small school running back that steals my heart. It's James Robinson a couple years ago, and that worked out really well when I was touting him on every podcast that was going on after the draft. Maybe this year's Julius Chestnut. We'll see after this game how he stands.
I really hope you come back with a bad report because I don't want to have to start chasing down Sacred Heart games after the season's over, Shane. No offense to Mr. Chestnut. We talked earlier about Cincinnati Notre Dame, 1:30 on NBC. Another game because I can't quit Nevada. 2:30 p.m. FS1, Nevada at Boise State. Another test for Carson Strong. We talked earlier about him being down a weapon, but he still got Romeo Doubs. He still got tight end Cole Turner. Carson Strong, man. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum now about this. The mobility is his issue. I'm going to write about it this coming up Friday. Teaser for everybody about mobility and quarterbacks. Just put that out there. But Carson Strong, Boise State's going to be one of the better teams he's going to play this year. They've got a couple guys on defense, especially one guy really low. I think he's one of the better nickel backs in this draft. I don't want to butcher his name, so let me look at it right quick. Where'd you go? Kakala Kaniho, the nickel. I think he could be one of the better nickel prospects in this class. Shane Irwin, their edge rusher, has some potential to be a late round guy. But the story of this game is going to be Carson Strong.
Yeah, Carson Strong and I think Romeo Doubs receiver now with Elijah Cooks out is going to have to carry that load, and he's a potential top 100 pick as well, along with Boise's Khalil Shakir. Both those guys have a shot at day 2.
To tell you how strongly I feel about this core of Nevada offensive players, they were each ranked in order on my top 100 board, like 45, 46, and 47. Carson Strong, Romeo Doubs, Cole Turner. I love all three of those guys. I think they're NFL players for sure. 2:30 p.m. CBS, Mississippi and Alabama. Another big SEC matchup this week that Shane, you think I'd be the one with all the SEC games. But it's you this week. Florida at Kentucky. I watched Kentucky last week, and I'm going to touch briefly because I want to see what you think of him before we get into some of these other guys. But a guy that stood out to me from Kentucky, I wanted to write about him in my 7 and 5, but I just ran out of space. Their big nose tackle, Juan Mccall, 6'3". They've got it. We had him listed at 379, and he's dropped 30 pounds down to 345. This guy's a man, and he took over that interior of South Carolina's offensive line a couple plays at a time that he had to come out because, I mean, he's 345 pounds. But he's a guy I'm anxious to hear what you think about him after you watch Kentucky this week.
Well, he's going to have a matchup against Florida, so I'm excited to see him, and I'll definitely focus on him because Florida has a offensive line. Stuart Reese, their guard, is a good player. Richard Garage is pretty good as well. So I think it's a good matchup for him, for the offensive tackles, and Kentucky on the other side too. I'm gonna be watching the I think the lines in this game more than anything else. Darren Kennard, Dart Rosenthal going up against Zachary Carter, I think is really good, the defensive lineman. Obviously, we have the edge guys and Jeremiah Moon. He's probably a potential Senior Bowl prospect for Florida, and so I think it's a good game, and maybe something I'll be hitting on a little bit later with our locks coming up.
Heck, that's what we call foreshadowing out there, everybody. Another guy I wrote about from that game last week, Chris Rodriguez, had over 100 yards rushing against South Carolina, but put the ball on the turf twice. It was his 4th fumble this season. That's an issue for Chris Rodriguez and his draft stock. Game for me, 6 p.m. on ESPN2, Baylor at Oklahoma State. My first look at both of these teams this year, and Oklahoma State's got a couple of guys in the secondary keep an eye on. Safety Colby Harvell-Peel and Trey Sterling. Both of those guys are big play guys. But the name that intrigues me is Baylor linebacker Terrell Bernard, guy I want to get a good look at this week.
Some solid players. I like Connor Galvin, the offensive tackle for Baylor as well, is pretty good. But I actually think that'll be a good game. That's going to be a fun one.
Another game that you'll watch this week, 6:30 on the Big Ten Network. I had fun watching Western Kentucky last week, man. I said, I made you pick this game because I wanted you to get your eyes on Bailey Zappi, the quarterback from Western Kentucky. He was one of my guys that on my 7-Up this week, and I even briefly mentioned another guy I know you love, Jareth Stearns, the slot receiver for the Hilltoppers. But probably the most highest rising prospect in this game is Michigan State running back Kenneth Walker III.
I think Kenneth Walker can be this year's Javonte Williams. He's the best running back in the nation after contact. Contact balance has been great. That transfer in and really it's propelled this Michigan State offense. So I'm excited to see him go up against the Hilltoppers. I mean, like this offense is good. Bailey Zappi's my QB 15, I think, right now already, and potential for more there. Definitely, him and Jareth Stearns are helping my college fantasy teams a little bit as they, just put up ridiculous numbers. But this offense is good, and their edge rusher D'Angelo Malone, definitely a player that I like as well.
Yeah, he was on my 7-Up as well this week. Joshua Simon, is he going to play the tight end for Western Kentucky? I haven't heard any yay or nay on that.
I think he's done for the year. I think he's not coming back.
So he's a junior, so should be able to come back next year. The game I'll be at live for Draft Countdown, covering it, and I'll probably do a full write-up on this game instead of none of these players I'm talking about here will be in my 7 and 5 columns. I'm probably just going to do a separate write-up for these guys for this game. But Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns playing at South Alabama. That's 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus. I saw South Alabama get Southern Miss in person earlier this year. I raved about Jalen Talbert earlier. Their quarterback, Jake Bentley, I have raved against many, 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 many times in the last 6 years. I will not talk about him again tonight. But so some players for the Cajuns there. Levi Lewis, their quarterback, 5'10", 184. We talked before we got on here that he feels like he's been in Lafayette forever now. Chris Smith's a big play running back for those guys. But a guy you said to look out for was Osiris Torrance, 6'5", 332 guard.
He's a big dude who can move, and I love those kind of players. Whether he's in this draft or next year's draft, he's fun. Louisiana has such a good bruising offensive line and run game. They are fun to watch. I think this will be a really fun game.
I look forward to seeing it Saturday night at Hancock Whitney Stadium here in Mobile. And Shane staying up late for us again, 10 p.m. on CBS Sports Network, Fresno State at Hawaii. And there's an interesting we got a question we're going to answer here. So we're going to skip over talking about one of these Hawaii players, Calvin Turner. We won't talk about him. We will answer that in a question later. But Jake Haener, the quarterback from Fresno State, picking up some momentum here in the last few weeks in the draft community.
He might have one of the highest football IQs of the quarterbacks in this draft. He places the football and doesn't put into trouble and makes great decisions, which I like those kind of players as backups. You can plug him in for a game and they're not going to lose you anything. So I'm excited to watch him. I'm excited to watch your boy, Ronnie Rivers, see what he can do. And I think Aaron Mosby, the edge rusher for Fresno, who we added after week 1, is someone to really watch out for. He continues to be dominant this year. I think he's a name that needs to be a little bit higher. Even Dante Boulder, offensive tackle, is pretty intriguing. So Fresno has some prospects, and Hawaii is Hawaii. So we'll stick with that.
Right. All right, let's get to everybody's favorite segment this week of the week. For the folks out there who want to make some money, well, we're 2-2 on our locks of the week. I started out 2-0. I've lost the last 2. You started at 0-2. You're on the streak, Shane. So we'll start with you. You foreshadowed it earlier. Who's the Shane P. Hallam lock of the week?
I'm taking Kentucky at home plus 8.5 against Florida. I think Florida had that close game against Alabama, and then they covered last week. I think Kentucky has a good offense. I think Will Levis is good. They have the offensive tackles to hold up. And, Florida kind of lets teams hang around a lot of times. They've had some injuries. I think this is maybe a little more of a slow-moving game. Florida wins by a touchdown, and Kentucky covers.
I like it. I'm going to go with maybe off the rails here a little bit, but I'm going to go into the Sun Belt. And Georgia Southern fired their coach this week. They're a 2-point favorite against Arkansas State. Arkansas State has been bad all year long. They've just been a bad football team. I think Georgia State, some of their players maybe felt like the coach got wronged by being terminated here mid-season. I'm going to go with Georgia Southern, 2-point favorites against Arkansas State. Georgia Southern to cover. Probably win outright.
Love it. Well, let's both get it this week, 3-2. Then we're making people some money. It'll be good.
That's the way to go. All right, we asked earlier on Twitter a couple of times today to get some Twitter questions. We've actually done this every week, and every week we usually don't get any questions, but this week we got a lot. So we're gonna get to all those questions right now. We'll start with the Twitter questions. We actually have a couple in chat as well. We'll get to, but we'll start with this question here, since we like talking about Matt Corral so much. Comes from @Ben Doggy on Twitter. Said, talking about Shane, you mentioned Matt Corral recently. Is he going to continue climbing the ranks, or is he going to stick behind the Howells and Rattlers of this class?
Matt Corral's my QB1. I think he is going to cement himself there with this week. I think he plays well against Alabama, and the buzz is already starting. It's going to be out of control if he can keep it close or even just score a ton of points against Bama, and if they lose that game. I think he's compared to Rattler and Howe, he's developed. He's gotten better. I'm not sure that Sam Howell or Spencer Rattler have gotten better from last year. I think it's such an important part of quarterback evaluation that I know myself in the past that I have overlooked. I think Corral is looking that way. So if he comes out on fire, I think he could be number one overall type of pick.
Speaking of Rattler or Howe, @CliffRitter101 asks us, Rattler or Howe, more specifically, is one a better scheme fit for anyone at the top of the draft, if that's possible to answer, because coaching changes could still occur. So Rattler or Howe, do they fit anybody near the top of the draft?
I think Sam Howell really fits with the Detroit Lions, right? With kind of their scheme now that they are really trying to be more kind of, I don't say smash mouth, but they build up the lines. DeAndre Swift is looking excellent for them. I think they're going to like someone with kind of the toughness of Sam Howell, who has been consistent for a long time and stands in there, doesn't get rattled, can get the ball down the field. I think that would be that'd probably be my top fit for a coaching staff that's still going to be around, and Dan Campbell's crew. I think they're playing well, even though they haven't won a game yet. They've gotten screwed a couple times. Spencer Rattler, I think he'd be intriguing on the Houston Texans. I think that would be an intriguing fit for him. We see this new scheme starting Tyrod Taylor. They have done a lot of boots. They have done some of the RPO stuff that Rattler's doing at Oklahoma. So I do think it could be a more natural transition than going to a more traditional pro style offense.
Sounds good to me. Got another question here from @Dwayne_Lavelle. This is more of a philosophical question, maybe not a complete draft question, but it says, in your opinion, when do you think a student athlete peaks as a player? Do you believe it's like a 1-2-star player can, play in the NFL or peaking later, or are stars important coming out of high school? Do players get missed because of wins and losses in college? Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think all those things are important, right? And we know that 1-2-star guys can excel and can get drafted high. And we saw with Zach Wilson, right? But
Khalil Mack is another great example of this. No star recruit coming out of high school.
And so, we could pick out those examples. But if you look at the statistics, you'll want to be a 5-star recruit, especially when you look in the last 10, 15 years as recruiting services. Since 24/7 Sports has opened, recruiting's gotten a lot more accurate and a lot better at what they've done. And so, 5-star prospects, you're almost talking about a 50-50 shot of making it to the NFL with top 100 capital. So, it's pretty good if you are that high of a recruit. So there is definitely a correlation between that talent. Whereas, we talk 1, 2, even 3-star prospects. I mean, there are tens of thousands, and you might a couple are going to blow up out of that because it's such a small percentage. But so I think there is a correlation. Like, you do want to be a really good high school player. It's not the be all end all. I don't think you should give up, as we've seen some of these small school guys. But I think it is an important piece to see. But you have to. I think the other thing is, and I mentioned it with the receivers, is if you can get on the field as a freshman and perform, that's a really good sign. I think something that we're learning through a lot of the data analysis is that these guys that play early and beat out guys that are older than them and play well, like, they're probably really good, because at 18, if you're going up against 20-year-olds and doing well, that's, that shows you can play. So I think it's something to look for when you see these freshmen like break out. They're probably really good. They're probably going to be really good prospects and probably be good NFL players as well.
It definitely correlates to wins and losses in college as far as recruiting goes, because, I mean, if you don't have like X amount of top 10 classes over a 4 to 5 year span, you don't make the playoff. I mean, that's been proven by statistics and everything. I mean, there's maybe an outlier here and there, but I mean, that's why the Alabamas, Clemson, Ohio State, that's why Oklahoma, that's why those guys are in the playoff every year. They get the best players. It's not rocket science here. As Shane Beamer went on his rant the other day that went viral when talking about Georgia, I mean, they've got the best players. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I don't necessarily know that players get missed because of wins and losses in college, though. If you're good, the NFL is going to find you. I don't care how bad your team is. I mean, that goes back to the early 80s with John Elway, who was a quarterback on a losing team at Stanford, but still went number 1 overall just because he was really good. So I don't think wins and losses hurt a player as far as their draft stock goes in college.
Yeah, and I look at like Adam Thielen. I went back and looked. I had Adam Thielen as my 57th ranked receiver in that class. It's like he's a stud. So yeah. Like as long as you can get into a camp and show that talent, like you'll make a team and you'll be good.
I had never heard of Adam Thielen. I didn't even have him on the list, so you were at least better than me. At least you had him listed. Another question here from @BenDoggy. It's supposed to be a deep class, maybe not the superstars up front, just based on the amount of kids coming out. What position do you think is going to be the deepest for depth?
It's a good question. I think every position is going to be really, really deep and really good. And we've talked about this a little bit. I think edge rusher is going to be up there. I think that's
where I was going to go.
It's really deep. I think corner is going to be deep, and it's going to be such a big need for a lot of teams that they're going to have to make that adjustment. And I think running back and receiver both are pretty deep classes. Running back relative to the number of running backs we usually have, which usually isn't much. I think there's some guys there, and I think receivers. Deep, even if it's not maybe as top heavy as Jamar Chase and those kind of guys.
We got a question in chat here, and I think it's actually really topical considering what happened on the sidelines with your Ohio State Buckeyes this past weekend. In today's world, how much do you guys think recruiters pay attention to social media, college and the NFL alike? Social media, I mean, is that going to hurt a kid's draft stock?
I think it can. I think in terms of recruiting into college, it definitely has an effect on recruits. If you're a really good player, if you're a 5-star player, you can probably get away with Twitter.
Wipe that Twitter account now, fellas.
Well, look. Honestly, if you're a 5-star player, you can get away with a lot more. If you're a high-end 3-star guy, like you better be wiping that social media account and making sure you don't have anything, because teams will drop you real quick and pull that scholarship. They don't need you. So I think it is taken into account when teams are looking at players. It's important. And, I'm a high school teacher. I interact with high school kids daily. And I can tell you, like they're not ready to be able to make those kind of decisions to know what's appropriate to put out there and what's not. Like they're just not there yet. So that's why I think we have things pop up like, oh, this is bad. Like, yeah, they're 16 and you can move on from that. But I don't think the NFL cares too much as long as there's nothing like super egregious, or if they don't have time to research and react, as we've seen when things come out during the draft. We've seen guys fall that way, but
Laramie Tunsil will never live that down.
Look, it turned out to be really, really good for the Miami Dolphins ultimately. So,
last question from the chat, and we kind of touched on it earlier when we were talking Fresno State, Hawaii, because there's definitely a player in that game that's going to fit this mold. Any prospects stand out as future NFL wide receiver, running back hybrids? Calvin Turner definitely does. And I think this is another topical question because some of the early success that Demetric Felton's had for Cleveland as a rookie.
Let me get one more. Kentucky, Wandel Robinson is definitely that kind of player. He's been their lead receiver. He came in as a running back recruit. He's got a lot of Antonio Gibson in him. I think Wandel Robinson, I'm not saying he's going to make that move back to running back, but I think there are going to be teams that are interested. So just like Calvin Turner is kind of the opposite, probably going to be a receiver in the NFL. I think Wandel could be someone that's looked at maybe more in that running back realm.
That's very interesting. All right, so that's gonna we'll go and close this out. We're over an hour here on this podcast. Any final thoughts here coming into this week, Shane?
No, I'm excited. I'm going to be updating my 2023 and 2024 boards here this week, and probably both mock drafts on Monday. I'll be re-releasing a 7-round 2023 and 3-round 2024 mock. So I made some big changes. I think both the 2023 board has a new player at the top at number 1 overall. So it's there's some big changes there. So if you're interested in some of the future guys, be on the lookout for that.
Can't wait to see it. Shane's a maniac. 7-round mock drafts for a draft of sophomores, man. It's crazy the work that you put in with that, man. And I love it. And I know our readers love it too. Google loves us for it. I know that. So can't wait to see that. And coming up Friday for me, I really enjoyed writing a couple of weeks ago. I encourage everybody to go back and read it. A piece I wrote on Luke Staley, 20-year, almost coming up on the 20-year anniversary when he was drafted in the NFL. Probably my favorite miss of all time. That's how old I am, folks. I've been watching draft guys for over 20 years. But Luke Staley was probably my favorite player that I've missed on going back in all the years I've done it. But this Friday, I'm going to talk about another miss that's more recent, and it's a quarterback. And maybe I won't be as lovingly praising in this one as I was on that one, but I just look forward to seeing that on Friday. But that's going to do it for tonight's Draft Countdown podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like and subscribe button. Get notifications for when we go live. Follow us on Twitter at Draft Countdown. Follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. And it's draft content, man. 24/7, 365 is what you get from Draft Countdown, man. And we love doing it. We love that you guys read it. So until next week, for Shane, for me, good night.